Hello friends, welcome to the techwithsoft. So today I'm going to cover a REST. Actually, I covered that in the previous session as well, where I was just covering that with the Spring Core. But I thought I should make a one separate video for it, okay? Because REST is one of the important part, and you should aware about it. What is REST? How does it work? So REST is a full form is representational state transfer. One more thing I want to tell you before I started. Actually, I'm making a video on different topics, okay, depending on that friends request or candidate request, right? So I will request if you want to watch the video from that see, right, you can see here we have a I will paste this link over that comments, okay, with the video itself. So you will get the different kind of channels playlist, right? Two videos we have in Java 8, right? So this is the beginning only. I will upload more video as well, so okay, later on. So if you want to write core Java, right, start from this only. If you want to write Java 8, please go with that. Same I will make with Spring Boot also. So please do not watch that recording randomly. Please go to the channel with playlist and watch that recording accordingly, and then you will get the clarity on it, right? Please watch account step by step. Okay, so now let's come to the point. So here we have a REST, representational state transfer, right? What does it do? It is actually used for convert data. Actually right now what happened, right? We may use any kind of front end, right? Any front end that can be compatible with the backend, right? So here we do work front end, right, and backend. So front end work right now, if you are a backend developer, right, we will do only the backend work. If you are a front end developer, you can do front end developer, and some of them are full stack developer. So full stack means they should understand front end and backend both. But right now I'm understanding that I'm a backend developer. I don't know about any front end. I don't know any front end. I know only the backend. Now I want to make up an application which could be connect with any front end. So what is my role right now? I will make a backend application, and this backend application will call by the front end application, front end guy, right? So I have to give one endpoints to the, I have to give one API to the front end guy. So front end guy will call this API and will take that input from the backend, right? So what backend guys will do, it will make one API. API is nothing like, I'm talking about URL. It is a URL. So backend guy will provide one URL to the front end guy, and front end guy will call this URL and perform that operation, right? So suppose front end did not complete a task. Like suppose I want to create one kind of registration form, or I want to create some login form, but front end did not ready yet. Okay, he is doing some other work, maybe he will give me later on. So how can I process myself? So that's why we have one Postman client that could work like a front end only. So here in the Postman, I will use the Postman. You can look how does it look. Let me open that as well. So if you do not have, please install it. It's lightweight kind of client only. It will look like that. Okay, it will look like that only. So here I will give some URL, right? I will give some URL and I will click on the send, then it will call directly my backend code. So this Postman will behave like a front end here. This Postman will behave like a front end here, because I'm a backend developer, right? I don't know how to write a front end code, and even the different guy is doing it, right? So I will make a backend work only. So Postman we are using for that URL. Right, so Postman will type the URL. How does it URL will type, that we are going to understand later on, right? So Java is a backend, I can understand, and Angular, React, Ajax, that could be a front end, right? So instead of that, what we are using Postman only, because I don't have a front end ready right now. So to make it right, here Postman will send data, Java will receive the data. You can see here front end does send data and will receive by the backend. That is called logical operation, right? Backend does do the logical operation, and that's sent to the database. So this request, when you are sending data from backend, front end to backend, right, that is called request. And whenever you will send data back from database to backend to front end, because we have to send some response as well, right, that is called response. So request means if data is coming from front end to backend and backend to database, that is called request. If data is coming from database to backend and backend to front end, that is called like response, right? But one thing you have to understand here, We are using Postman, Angular, React or Ajax, anything as a front end, and Java as a back end, Java or Node or C# or Python. It could be any language like that, right? They both are having a different object format. Java having a different object format, front end having a Angular, React, Ajax, Postman having a different object format. What are the object format that they do use? That is JSON object, JavaScript object, right? JSON object. What backenders use? That is use Java object only, right? Java object. So when we are taking the input from the client, we have to make it Java compatible, and we are sending the response. That time also we have to make it front end compatible, right? So compatible means what we are converting. Like for example, I am getting request, front end send the back end. So when front end will send the request to the back end, right, that time it will convert to my Java object. Who does do that? So that is doing by one annotation called at request body. So request body is one of the annotation. What it does, it will accept the data from the Postman and will cut, because Postman does send data into JSON format only, right? So that JSON format data will convert into a Java object. Who does do that? Request body does that. So request body responsibility is that convert JavaScript object to JavaScript object, which is a JSON, right, to the Java object. So Java object can understand that, okay, and it will bind with the entity class as well. Entity class or model class, that also I will tell you what is entity class, right? Entity class is a class which will having attribute and getter setters. That class called entity class. So that will by default call the setter method of the entity class. So request body, because setter method only will set the value, right? So request body does convert that JSON object to the Java object, as well as call the setter method of the entity class. That is the meaning of setting the value, right? Request body. And when it is going to the back database to backend to front end, right, then backend will send the Java object. Java object does convert to the front end like Postman, that could be JSON only. Normally we have other format as well, XML format, plain text format, right? But JSON format is too much popular, and as per my experience, maximum company to do deal with the JSON object only, because JSON object is compatible with all the front end, right? So that's why we are talking the example of JSON only. So here database, the backend will send the Java object and front end does understand the JSON object only, right? Then to convert it, we have to use response body. So response body is also an annotation. What does it do? It will convert my Java object into the JavaScript object, right? So my Java object will convert into JSON object, right? That is doing by the response body. It is also one kind of annotation, right? So hope it is clear what is the use of request body and response body that we will use very frequently, right? After that, we will understand what is the endpoint. Endpoint is nothing like a kind of, we'll start with a forward slash, like get data is a one endpoint, right? So endpoint we will write on the top of the method in the controller class, right? So what is that classes we do create, that I will let you know later. Right now you have to understand that endpoint always will be in a controller class, okay? Will be in a control class which could be a part of any method, right? So it is used to call a specific method. We do define it in the controller class, right? So endpoints, so from the front end, right, we will call this endpoint only. So endpoint will be a part of the URL, that you can understand. If you are writing the URL, right, so this URL cannot be complete without the endpoint, right? So here it could be a part of the URL, right? Here we are writing, right, API, that backend will create one URL, right? So inside this URL only we will have this endpoint, and for multiple methods I will create a number of methods, right? So with the URL it will having a multiple endpoints, and multiple endpoints will call the multiple methods, right? Like for example in core Java, if you have like n number of line code, right, who will call that? Like for example, if I have 100 lines of code, right, let's say I'm creating one class here. I'm a class like test. In the test class I am having a suppose 100 line of code, right? So can anybody answer? You can think on what it could written, and I mean at which line it will start the execution, right? So it will always look the main method, right? From the main method it will start the execution, and step by step it will go further and will perform the operation. If I will say directly from the first line it will start the execution, no, it will not start. If there is a no main method, execution will not be start. It will give may not find exception kind of that, right? Same thing is here also. at the one point it has to start the execution, right? So that will start the execution from the controller itself, and in the controller it will look the endpoints. So endpoint will be associated on the top of the method, and every method, if I suppose having a 10 method, right, every 10 methods will behave like a main method. So from there it will start the execution, perform some kind of part, return the response, request response for every method. It will work like that only. Okay, so this endpoint will look like this only. It is an endpoint that could be a part of URL like that. Okay, so for that we have a like CRUD operation, right? CRUD we have a like, so normally what happen, right, when do we perform any operation? So that could be 4 type of operation which we do perform, right? First one is a C, create. That could be insert operation, right? Because normally in enterprise application, web application, we do deal with this 4 only in the different ways actually. In the different ways, what are the different ways that we will discuss on it? So we will perform this 4 operation: create, read, update and delete. So update we will do in 2 ways. Okay, let's start with the create first. So create what? Create means I am inserting the record. So for that, Java has given one endpoint, one annotation called at post mapping. That is again also part of REST only, right? At post mapping, that means it post name is already suggesting, that means it is used for inserting the record. It is an annotation that is used for insert the record, right? Insert record. It is a method label annotation. So this post mapping annotation we can use only that method label. We cannot use that on the class label. So we have a 2 type of annotation. Some of the annotation we will use on the top of the method, and some of the annotation we will use on the top of the class. So post mapping, always remember that don't put that on the label of class. It will always at the level of the method only, right? And for read, for fetch, which mapping we will use, annotation we will use at get mapping. Get mapping does get the data. I mean, it will retrieve the data, right? It is also method label annotation. So this CRUD operation we will perform. So for CRUD, you should know what is the meaning of create, what is the meaning of our read, what is the meaning of you update. So for update, again it is having an annotation called put mapping, right? So update we will do 2 ways. One is a fully update, second one is a partially update. If you have a partially update, we will use put mapping. If it is a full update, fully update, right, we will use put mapping. If it is a partially update, we will use patch mapping. So patch mapping also we will use. Remember that there is a difference between put and mapping and patch mapping. Both are using for update the record. Patch mapping is if it is updating a single record. Put mapping if it is updating like five records, not 5 records, I mean 5 number of columns will affect, 10 number of column will affect, right? I mean fully update, or that time we will use put mapping. Patch mapping will for partially update. Few of the part I want to update, not completely like that, right? Delete mapping is also used for deleting the record. If I want to delete the data from the DB, then we have to go with the delete mapping. So that way we do perform this CRUD operations: create, read, update and delete. And respective, like we have post mapping, get mapping, put mapping and patch mapping and delete mapping. They are used for a specific operation. If you are going to perform this, right, that means that will happen. If you are going to perform this operation, then that will happen. Before this REST, right, that time also that work was going on, that is doing by the request mapping. So request mapping is also one of the annotation which will take the endpoints, right? So request mapping we were using when we were not using this REST API, but in REST API also we will use that. So for that, in the REST API we will not use this in the method label, we will use that at the class label, right? That will also take endpoints actually as a parameter. So here also we do pass some kind of endpoints, right? So that do we use on the class label. So request mapping is also kind of request mapping can be used in place of post mapping, get mapping, put mapping. But with the request mapping, right, the behavior cannot be clear. It could be used for any of the type. That time what happened, we have to explicitly define that this request mapping we are going to use for either for post mapping, get mapping, put mapping or patch mapping, right? So this way we will use request mapping, but right now request mapping, it is a method label annotation as well as class label, right? But we will use that on the top of the class only, right, but not in the top of the method. So that way we do understand this request mapping annotation, right? So these are the some annotation. If you are going to start with the REST, right, you can go through with that, and that will help you a lot to understand that logics, to understand the code, right? Next we do understand what the server status code. So we have a different type of server status code. Server status code means that backend does return the response, right, to the client. That time we do use this server status code. And according to the server status code only, that front end guys just understand what the response is coming from the client. If it is a 200, that means it is okay. Okay, everything is fine. 204, okay with no body, right? So here I can select okay with content. Okay with content. 204 means okay with no body. 404 like resource not found. 401, 403 that is kind of forbidden, right? And 405 that is for method mismatch. So we will understand that all this, okay, no worries on it. Mismatch, but yeah, you should know that server status code purpose. 404 mismatch, right? Method mismatch. 403 I think I'm getting a bit confusion on it. 401 I think is for forbidden, something like that, or bad request something. It is for bad request, okay, and 403 like forbidden, something like that. Okay, forbidden. So this is the purpose of this all server status code, and according to that only front end guys do decide what operation they have to perform with that specific operation, right? But other than that, we have one stereotype annotation that is also one of the important part if you are going to cover, right, Spring Boot. So here we are going to cover component, controller, service and repository. So these are the stereotype annotation, right? Stereotype is nothing like one package name. Package is nothing like a folder that you know, right, in Java. So it is a one package. Inside that package we are having this for annotation, where component is a parent of controller, service and repository. Component is a parent, controller, service, repository as a child of this component annotation, right? So why do we use this? This is only responsible for instantiate the bean, instantiate the class. Bean is nothing like object only, right? If you have any doubt on it, you can look the previous Spring Core lecture. There you will understand what is a bean actually. So bean is nothing like objects. So as we have seen Spring, like that container is responsible to manage the life cycle, I mean creating to destroy. So everything is doing by the container itself. So container does itself is create the object, right? So here in this, if suppose I will create a one class like suppose A, right? Like class A. So normally if you want to create object, right, what do we do here? We do right here A1 equal to, it is in a core Java style, right? Like new A, right? Then what happened, right? This is creating the object. So this part is doing by this all annotation that you can understand. So if I will use like at top of this class A, if I will use suppose like @controller, @controller, then what does it do? It is internally called the new method and create the object of this A class, right? So this annotation I can use on the top of the class, and that, I mean, I can use any one of them, but they are having a different purpose that I will let you know what is the purpose of controller, service and repository when do we do the implementation. But now you have to understand that only this annotation are responsible for creating the object, right? Like new keyword, right? So if you are putting the new keyword, same we can do in the this annotation. We can use any one of them, right? So that is the use of stereotype annotation, component, controller, service and repository, right? So here we can do Spring Boot implementation by two ways: Spring Boot plain, right, or Spring Boot with REST. So with Spring Boot we will use annotation like controller or controller class, but in Spring Boot with REST, right, I will use here like REST controller. So REST controller is a one kind of advanced form of controller, or we can say like that controller we will use if we are using plain Spring Boot, and REST control we will use if we are using Spring Boot with REST, right? So people do ask you what is the difference between controller and REST controller, right? So the difference is that REST controller equal to we have @ controller plus we have like response body. So whenever you want to perform two operation, control with the response body, always go with the REST controller. With controller, right, I have to explicitly keep response body. I will tell you how to keep it. So we will see example with the controller as well as with the REST controller. So REST controller is a more easy or more, I can say like flexible over the controller, because it is having a REST response body implicit on it, right? So this is all some basics annotation that we are going to use to implement the REST API. Other than that, we have a number of annotations, so we will look on the requirement basis. Okay, whatever, like we have a configuration annotation, we have like a bean annotation, right? configuration annotation also we have, right? At the rate bean annotation we have, right? Other than that we have many more annotation we have, right? So that we do look step by step when do we cover on the next. Okay, so this much is required if you want to understand the REST API. I have given the brief on it. Please look on it, and if you have any doubt, any question, please put me on comment, so I will try to give answer of it, or I will make a different video for it. Yeah, if you like the video, please subscribe it. Okay, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye bye.